Daryl Recommends Podcast is a podcast recommending series and shouldn't be mistaken as a reviewing one. Opinions about each show are my own and should not reflect what each podcast has to offer. Content warnings aside, I believe that if any recommendation in my series interests you, you should give it a chance, regardless of how I personally feel about the show.
Darker than your dreams, and farther north than you remember, there is a forest where life and death meet. Ladies, gentlemen, and indescribable beings, I have not interrupted your nightmares before. I am the one who watches when you think no one is watching. I am in the shadow under your bed, and I know each skeleton in your closet. You have so many skeletons in your closet. I see where you have been and who you used to be, but I do not know where you are going. Where are you going? I am a guardian of all who dream. I am 100 eyes in the dark. I am your loyal host, Nicky Nick, for the first and certainly not the last time, bidding you hello from the Hallowoods.
After the end of the world and in the final days of humanity, we follow our many-eyed narrator, Nicky Nick, in the many interconnecting storylines of residents in the dark and dangerous Hallowoods. Hello from the Hallowoods is a queer horror podcast created by William A. Wellman on their ever-going quest to find new and creative ways to hurt me emotionally. And yes, I do mean me, and possibly a lot of other people, but I know it's hurt me emotionally because the show is really good. There's over 100 episodes with a large cast and very well written and interconnected storylines. And I love the show a lot. I've been so excited to actually recommend this show to people specifically because of just how well written it is. With a show with so many characters that it likes to focus on, the fact that it goes and manages to make every character feel so well-rounded, even if some have significantly more screen time than other characters, it's very well done. And it's only in the beginning of its third season. And what's great too is just some of the voices they got for it. They have a lot of people whose other shows I really like Steve Shell from Old Gods of Appalachia and Harlan Guthrie from Malevolent. And they also have Casper Oliver from Jar of Rebuke and Kid and Jensen from Mubi and everybody else. And it's just, I love this show so much. William A. Wellman is such a great voice actor too, especially since they voice all the characters and just the narration and managing to tell these different storylines with sometimes large groups of characters all together in one setting and still manage to have a distinct voice for each and every single one of them. On top of just being a really great narrator, I love the development that they go from having Nicky Nick being this just separate ambient who's just there reading what these characters are going through to their dreaming audience, all the way to being this more emotional, well-rounded character with a lot of depth to him. And I think it's just really great. The story pulls up a lot of different themes such as queer love, religious trauma in regards to queerness, capitalism selling into populist distraction as a ways of control, protesting government-approved way as another means of control, in general just capitalism shittiness. We love a good podcast that talks about how capitalism is shitty. And one of the things that I really like with this show is the fact that, it's not just the general, capitalism bad and leave it at that, because I could eat that content for days, but the fact that it goes deeper into the different nuances of just how capitalism corrupts society in the ways, such as I said, about protesting in government-approved ways as a means of control. That section that they did for that, even if it was just a brief little interlude in between stories, was just it was so good. And just different stuff with some of the motivations of some of our villains in the show. It's so well written. I don't think I never thought I would find a show that would give me a character I hate more than Elias Bouchard from the Magnus Archives, and this show has still managed to give me a character that I hate more than Elias Bouchard from the Magnus Archives, and still make him a very well-written, rounded character that interests me a lot, despite the fact that I think they're a horrible, shitty person. And that's just, for a show to be able to do that, it's just done so well in Hello from the Hallowoods. One of the things that I like too about this show, especially since I only started reading the books a bit, and I still have a couple of books that I was gifted that I still have to read, the show gives me a lot of vibes of like if someone took Discworld by Terry Pratchett and combined it with the entire discography of Lord Huron's music, mainly their albums Strange Trails and VD Noir, and combined them together, which I can eat that shit up. I love Lord Huron's music a lot, and just like it has the same vibes that the show gives me. Like if you like consume like one piece of media and listen or watch something else and it just has the same vibes, that's what I get. And that's what it feels like to me. And yes, I guess you could say Hosier's music does the same thing as well, but I didn't think about Hosier, I thought about Lord Huron. And I just love the setting and the vibes that the show gives me. I need to not clap my hands in front of the mic. But it's just, it's so well done. I can just gush about this show a lot. I need more people to gush about this show with. And another thing that's like really cool that I like, sometimes it took me a bit to realize what I was doing, and other ones I could get like as soon as it's like referenced, is it references a lot of like well-known horror media such as Dracula, The Thing, Jekyll and Hyde. The Jekyll and Hyde one took me a little bit. To be honest, it wasn't until I was at work, because I work with dogs, and I was sitting there, and I was little interlude. I work with dogs, and one of our dogs was a German Shepherd, and I was thinking of Hello from the Hollowoods, and I was thinking of Jackie and Heidi. And I was just like, haha, Jackie and Heidi, like Jekyll and Hyde. And I was like, wait a minute. And just the themes in the show are just so good. I love that it sets up the characters, and it's the formatting is a bit strange because it took me a minute to like kind of like get into the flow of how each episode was going to be. And even then, it sometimes does break that flow, though not often. And when it does it so good. But I love that it's very weird because a lot of this show is Nicky Nick narrating these other characters' stories in different characters' perspectives as they like intermingle and sometimes go off into their own branches, and sometimes like, you know, stories will interconnect. And it's like, okay, so there's this character narrating this story, and it's really weird when it gets to points where these characters' stories go interact with Nick like on a more personal level, and it kind of has like that realization that this is not just a guy telling you a story, this stuff is happening at the same time that you're hearing this from Nicky Nick. And I think that's just really cool. It's just a really weird, cool, I mean, it's a weird format to get used to, but it's a really cool way to do it. And of course, just like with a lot of shows, podcasts especially, I love listening to podcasts with queer rep. This show has queer rep, and it exceeds my expectations for like the kind of queer rep that I want present in podcasting, or just any kind of like media in general, because it's like, other than just like, you know, having queer characters in it, it has characters with neo-pronouns, it has characters who experiment with their pronouns, it has characters who are gender fluid, who are actually like change their pronouns, it has characters who use they them pronouns, it has characters who like have their own explanation with their queer identity, and it's so good. It's like the show like blew my expectations for like a show that labels itself as a queer horror podcast. It kind of like upped the bar for me when it comes to like queer rep in like queer shows and just media. And like I have my own distinction with like shows with queer rep and shows that are specifically queer shows, which I plan on making a video about that one day. That probably will hopefully happen soon if I can get around to writing a script for it. But yeah, this show just blew it out of the water. And like, what's so nice about the show is even with a large cast of characters, it manages to get characters who are at first, like at the first season, I didn't care too much about, or I wasn't as interested in, and then end up like becoming like characters I've become invested in later on. Like I said, this show is like a little over 100 episodes, but it's only at the beginning of season 3. This is also the only show that has taken a character I disliked a lot in the first season and made him one of my absolute favorite characters by like where it's currently updating at. And it did it in the span of like one episode, and I love that. I love that it did that. It's so funny. The show did like a lot of stuff that I did not expect for it to do, especially since I had a hard time listening to it at the beginning for multiple reasons, less so about the stuff in the show itself in the beginning, because like I said, the formatting of it could get a bit hard to like understand if you first start watching it. watching it. It's a podcast. You listen to podcasts. You don't watch podcasts. No, it was other reasons that kept me from continuing the show. Yeah, no, I'm caught up now, so that's good. And the plot's really good. It has overarching plots that most of them end by the end of the season. However, it also sets up for the next plots, like at the end of the season, and sometimes even midway through the season. Sometimes it'll have these characters who get introduced, and they're like they're maybe around for like an episode or two, and then they have like a huge storyline in the next season. And I think that's really cool that it does it like that. And I keep bringing up like getting used to the formatting of the show, but it does get easier to follow once you realize like what it is. One of the things with this show that like is confusing at first, but it gets easier to follow later, is it presents lore and information about the world to you as if you should already know it. But then characters in the show, because sometimes a character won't know something that Nick expects the dreamer to already know, they'll explain it and you start piecing everything together. So it's kind of like a conspiracy board that doesn't really have a mystery to it. Or rather, it gives you information that leads to like, oh, there's a mystery to this based off the stuff we already know. And I think that's great. And it's just really nice. It's really nice to have a show like that. And I I think earlier I said that the show has like some themes regarding religious trauma to queerness, but I also like the fact that although it does have that conversation around that, they don't have characters who exist just to be traumatized. It definitely has like focus on like characters who are traumatized, such as like Percy Reed and everything he's going through. And I really love his storyline, and I can't wait to see where he goes from there. But it's not where I see with a lot of like, especially like mainstream shows that are created by like big like corporations, where it's like we have a trans character who's traumatized, and all they are is traumatized because they're trans, and that's how they exist through the whole story. And I like that this doesn't do that. It's a very like small, simple thing to ask for when it comes to writing trans characters, but it makes me really glad that they actually like that there's actually stuff out there that isn't just that, you know. And like Nick is one of my favorite characters. I love his development through the story. How they start off as this like distant, detached character, and they get more emotional as the story evolves and become more involved with the story themselves. And I think that's just it's just so good. I could just like gush so long about like the stuff about this show. However, there's other stuff. If I gush about everything in the show, then I'm just might as well explain the plot, which I don't think I can actually explain the plot of Hello from the Hollow Woods, because I would just be like, this character did this, and then this other character who was doing this a while ago. That would be really hard. But if you could listen to it, I recommend it. It's like up there. It's like literally, if I had like to make a list of my top favorite podcasts, this would be in my top 5. This probably the only podcast I think I like more than Hello from the Hollowoods at this point is probably the Magnus Archives. But it's also very hard for me to find a show that got me like that as quickly as the Magnus Archives did, because I like being obsessed with media. Anyway, however, the show is a horror podcast, and it does have things such as body horror, general, like, you know, your suspenseful horror. It's got gore, it's got dead animals. If you're sensitive to dead animals, usually when there's dead animals, they're usually undead, and my dogs are barking in the background, so this is a very bad timing to be talking about dead animals, but I would not recommend it. And also, like I said, with the like religious themes, especially religious themes to like religious trauma due to queerness, that's something I definitely want to warn you ahead, especially for the very first season. However, one of the good news about the show is that it does have content warnings on every single episode, so that's good, because as much as I love horror shows, it's very hard to recommend horror shows that don't really content warnings in their descriptions. My biggest forever pet peeve of Malevolent, unfortunately. But you know, not every show can be perfect. So the one that I think this is probably one of the only shows like the Magnus Archives where I was disappointed with catching up to the newest episode, because now I have to wait for episodes. Because when it gets good, it gets good. And it keeps getting good. And sometimes it'll have its moments where things are slow, and then it gets really good again. And of course, like, you know, in the show you have to have your moments where nothing is really going on too much, pacing-wise. And I think that's what makes it really easy to listen through. But now I just can't be like, it's just that general upsetness of being like, okay, listen to this episode, now I get to know what happens next. No, I'm caught up. But now that means that I can listen to it with everybody else. And I could just sit and just talk. I could literally write essays about this show. Like, I'm hoping at some point that maybe my school, because I'm in school, will at some point let me write more stuff about themes and like stories, and I could just submit the show. I could write so many essays about the show. I want my school to let me write essays about the show. It's just so well done, and I could literally just go on for so long. Like, the whole monetization of dreaming that is just present throughout the show with like Botco and Lady Ethel Mallory is just, oh gosh, I could just talk about it. I could talk about it, but I can't talk too much about it because I actually want people to go listen to it. I want more people to go listen to it. I want my friends to go listen to it. I keep trying to convince my friends to listen to Hello from the Hollowwoods, and I got like maybe one person semi-interested in it. But not too many, because nobody listens to as much podcasts as I listen to in my life. Hey, but that's okay. That's okay, because I exist specifically to tell you guys about these shows. So I'm gonna end this before it gets too long, because this actually might be my longest video yet. So I am going to be linking their Patreon down below. William's Patreon posts little short stories after every episode that they write. They're like 100 words, I think-ish each. I have to double check, but I recommend you go donate to their Patreon if you want to, if you really like Hello from the Hollowwoods. And as always, if there's a show you want me to go listen to, recommend it below. I have a bunch bookmarked, so you never know if I already am aware of it. However, people suggesting stuff or me like seeing about like cool stuff happening in the show will get me to up it on my like to listen to next list quicker. Currently, I'm gonna try to get another video after this one sooner because I want to get through shows I already have listened to as well, like from when I was doing this series on TikTok. Next one's gonna be one that I haven't done a video for, but the one after that I'm hoping will be one for what I did. And yeah, that's about it. If you want to follow me on my socials, I will be linking those as well, as always. And go forth and give the show a listen for me, please, because I would appreciate it. Goodbye.